This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. We don't have a guest for you today. We had, what, like 16 surprise guests, Doug, was it last week for the 100th episode? It was a ton of guests. And my guest is certainly not Doug the producer. Those of you who caught the show last week and you listened through to the end, you learned at the same time that I learned that there is another show called the Writers Still Not Writing After Show podcast, hosted by the author Kurt Clopton, in which he interviews Doug, and Doug mostly makes fun of me. And I have to admit, in the last week, I have listened to a number of episodes, and it's actually pretty funny. And most of the accusations and criticisms are fair, though pointed. But yeah, Doug and I are still not quite working through all of the. I got some feelings about the fact that I was not made aware of the podcast that Kurt hosts. And so Doug and we're working that out. Doug is here. Doug is in costume. Doug is doing his job. And we'll see how that plays itself out. So you can hear this joy in my voice, this excitement to be with all of you, this happiness, that's fake. This is the show must go on, right? And so hopefully, I mean, if anything, if you can take anything from that demonstration there, think about your loved ones, think about the people around you who seem to be doing okay right now. If they are doing okay, that's deeply messed up. And if they are only seeming to be okay, be aware of that. Because everybody is carrying a lot right now, either in the form of fear, anxiety, or some deep rot that makes them think this is okay. Because yeah, it's not okay, and we're just gonna move on in the show. Doesn't mean we're just going to ignore that this is happening in our reality. But I got my shirt here. You can see that we always dress up in costume. And for this week's episode, I am wearing my shirt that says, "Fight fascism with your voice while you still can." We've got this on stickers. We pass it out at various functions. We've got it on a t-shirt at the NotAPipePublishing page we have for years now. And I think it's still a worthwhile investment if you believe it is still possible to fight fascism with your voice right now. Will we be able to fight fascism with our voices indefinitely? That has now come into question, I think, even more. I do believe that what we are experiencing is, to some degree, there are so many explanations for what got us here that are accurate, that are legitimate. But one that I would ask you to consider is that this is the consequence of silence. And I think we have to own that, all of us, no matter how outspoken you have been. We all need to admit there's another conversation we could have had. There's somebody else. It's like when you are trying to push back against you know, all the kinds of oppressive systems that are embedded in our culture. And you want to fight back against racism, sexism, fat phobia, ableism, and you know you don't have it in you when it is so pervasive in the culture to interrupt every joke, right? To stop every person who uses an expression that they may not have even ever considered. It's just part of our language. And say, hold on, think about that. Think about how that is still perpetuating something. We have all let things slide. And not only have we let things slide with our friends, with our loved ones, but I think we all have to admit there is a uncomfortable conversation you might have been willing to have, and then there's one that was one step further, where you just said, I can't with this person. I cannot sit down and invest the time and energy to say to this person, you have to care about other people around you in this way or that way. And that we should also acknowledge would never have worked with everyone, right? That's not, but I refuse to believe that it wouldn't have worked with the majority of people. And here's why. What we are confronting now is fascism. And I know that that term gets kind of tossed around and you know it has lost a lot of potency with a lot of folks because you know they're saying you're using a term from a political philosophy class on me, and we can't even agree as a country if this is a democracy or a republic without people yelling and screaming at one another. You know, most people will use socialism as a slur and have no idea what socialism means. You know, the people who are police and teachers and firefighters and librarians who will say they don't like socialism, and yet they all, you know, work for the public on taxpayer funded jobs. They are employed in a socialist enterprise, and yet will go, I don't like socialism. And so, you know, in that context, we know it wouldn't have worked to defeat some fascist impulses. I think those are always going to exist in any human society. There is a desire for security and authority that all human beings have. But the way that fascism becomes a movement is that cowardly people, the people who stand behind a bully and laugh, feel empowered. And again, we all could become that person, right? We have all heard a joke that is punching down and we laughed. Every human being has had that experience. And I do believe we can create a society where enough people say, hey, that's shameful. That's not going to work here. That those folks don't look around at one another and go, we're all laughing, so it's okay. And instead, we have said, okay, there's critical mass in this room. I can't go into this space and say that's not okay because it's 100 to 1. Well, how did it get to 101? Right? We allowed it to be 2 and 3 and 5, and now it's 100 to 1. Right? And so we need to speak out while we can. And we need to acknowledge that that might not be eternal. The 100, the numbers might now be against us. But wearing my shirt, still trying to speak out. In fact, I will still be speaking out more loudly, but more details on that to come. I always ask authors what has been their favorite distraction this week, and I have had no time for distractions. And I acknowledge that my way of coping, which is not healthy, is that I work to avoid feeling. And this is something that I learned from my parents. This is something that I'm dealing with my therapist. I know it's not the best way to deal with problems. And I will joke that I am, the reason I can't take a vacation, relax, is because then I would have to feel. Um, and that is a grim joke, right? Because I'm telling the truth. And so I am working like crazy right now. I am writing a lot, and I am preparing and planning. And again, more on the results of that to come soon. But there will be news. There will be some exciting news coming up that is positive within this kind of stratification of, recognizing that at its root, it's deeply sad. The situation we are in is still grim, but there are things we can do, right? And that might be a thin veneer of positivity on top, but I'm not gonna. I read the term this week, bright side situation. I'm not gonna bright side this, right? At the same time, I'm going to continue planning and working to try and either make the situation better or prevent myself from feeling. And that's where I'm at. So, this is the second season of Writers Not Writing, and I wasn't sure if I was going to do the seasons thing. But after episode 100, the election was immediately after. And so it feels now completely appropriate to say, welcome to season 2 of Writers Not Writing, beginning with episode 101. And this notion of seasons has me thinking about seasons as I'm looking, beyond the camera, through the window, past Doug. I can see through the window the trees with their incredible blazing red and orange leaves on my street. Fall is here. We have entered into a new season in terms of the actual year, but I think a lot of us are coming to terms with the fact that we have entered into a new season in another way too. And I am in another season, beginning another season of my life. And that need not be in and of itself a source of despair. This is going to be a different world that I'm going to experience, a different part of my life. And that is, in the same way when fall comes, you cannot prevent it. This season 2 of Writers Not Writing and this new season of Benjamin Gorman is upon me. And I'm going to try and make the best of that without pretending that the change is, all perfect, because it is far from that. So we are going to go to our ad break. I know it's very early in the show, but I've got something that I want you to hear afterwards. So please do come back after the ads, and I have a gift for you. Special announcement time. NotAPipePublishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone: 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60 second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run 1 or 2 of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
You deserve a vacation.
How about a trip to a dude ranch on a colony planet?
Or a journey to a universe where wizards call lightning down from the sky and calm rumbling volcanoes?
Or a holiday tour of the major cities of Europe with vampires and werewolves and witches as guides.
Or maybe just a nice hot sudsy bath with a book of poetry that will make you cry and sigh and laugh.
We've got you covered.
A paperback will appear on your doorstep each month to whisk you away, and you'll return refreshed, enlightened, and ready to make the world we share a brighter place for everyone.
Or if you prefer, you can sign up for a quarterly subscription and get 4 YA titles, 4 adult titles, or 4 collections of poetry per year.
Plus, you'll get book club questions from the author before you start the book and an interview with the author afterwards.
So, if you are in a book group or want to start one, this is everything you need in a kit. Will we occasionally throw in some extra surprises just to say thank you to our members? Of course.
You can also give someone their very own membership with all of the rights and privileges pertaining thereto.
So, find a reward level that's right for you.
And share this with your friends.
Join the Indulge Your Shelf book club today. Your bookshelves deserve a little pampering.
Hi, I'm children's author Sarah Geddes. I'd love for you to check out my book, Henry the Sneezing Dragon. It's about a clumsy dragon in search of friendship. My book, To the Moon, a Jacob and Trevor adventure, will be released September 2024, a story about 2 little boys who use fairy dust to travel to the moon. And in fall 2024, The Water Bear Astronaut, about a tardigrade who travels to space, will also be coming out. All books will be available on Amazon.
I'm Mary Kendall. I'm a fiction writer. I write stories that are weird, odd, gothic-y, a little bit left off center. What is this? This is my latest release, Bottled Secrets of Rosewood. It's billed as a contemporary gothic thriller, and it's being touted as a page-turner by people that are reading it. It was inspired by a real-life find, a blue bottle that was uncovered in an archaeology dig outside of Williamsburg, Virginia. The bottle was discovered to be a witch bottle. Witch bottles were a thing back in the day. They were filled with items such as thorns, clippings, glass chips to draw out evil intent from the person holding the bottle. Sound interesting? You can find out more at my website, marykendallauthor.com, or if you'd like to buy the book, it's available where all books are sold.
Welcome back. So I promised a gift, and I thought about making it just a homework assignment. I'm a teacher. That's what we do, right? Hey, here's this thing that you need to accomplish. It's valuable. Here you go. Or it's busy work. We shouldn't do that. I've been trying to get away from homework as much as possible in my own classes, but there are times when we need to say this thing needs to be done, and the time to do it, it cannot be provided in this classroom. And I thought maybe the time to do this could not be provided on this show, and I would just assign you this reading outside of the podcast. But it can be done right here. This is an in-class assignment. Again, I've teased, I've hinted at the fact that I'm going to have a lot of announcements and explanations for some of the changes going on in my life that will be forthcoming. And one of the things that I have done as I've been kind of breaking news to various people in my lives, I've been referencing a particular short story. And it's The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. LeGuin. And so in my contemplating what I would do on the show, I realized my best bet is to turn your attention to a writer who was better, right? A writer that we should have read more and thought more about and listened to more carefully. Ursula K. LeGuin, who also happens to be an Oregon writer and somebody that I deeply admire. So if I may, I would like to share with you the story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. LeGuin. with a clamor of bells that set the swallows soaring. The festival of summer came to the city Omelas, bright-towered by the sea. The ringing of the boats in harbor sparkled with flags. In the streets between houses with red roofs and painted walls, between old moss-grown gardens and under avenues of trees, past great parks and public buildings, processions moved. Some were decorous, old people in long stiff robes of mauve and gray, grave master workmen, quiet, merry women carrying their babies and chatting as they walked. In other streets, the music beat faster, a shimmering gong and tambourine, and the people went dancing. The procession was a dance. Children dodged in and out, their high calls rising like the swallows crossing flights over the music and the singing. All the processions wound toward the north side of the city, where on the great water meadow called the Green Fields, boys and girls, naked in the bright air, with mud-stained feet and ankles and long lithe arms, exercised their restive horses before the race. The horses wore no gear at all, but a halter without bit. Their manes were braided with streamers of silver, gold, and green. They flared their nostrils and pranced and boasted to one another. They were vastly excited, the horse being the only animal who has adopted our ceremonies as his own. Far off to the north and west, the mountains stood up, half encircling Omelas on her bay. The air of morning was so clear that the snow still crowning the 18 peaks burned with white gold fire across the miles of sunlit air, under the dark blue of the sky. There was just enough wind to make the banners that marked the race course snap and flutter now and then. In the silence of the broad green meadows, one could hear the music winding throughout the city streets, farther and nearer and ever approaching. A cheerful faint sweetness of the air from time to time trembled and gathered together and broke out into the great joyous clanging of the bells. Joyous. How is one to tell you about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. But we do not say the words of cheer much anymore. All smiles have become archaic. Given a description such as this one tends to make certain assumptions. Given a description such as this one tends to look next for a king, mounted on a splendid stallion and surrounded by his noble knights, or perhaps in a golden litter borne by great muscled slaves. But there was no king. They did not use swords or keep slaves. They were not barbarians. I do not know the rules and laws of their society, but I suspect that they were singularly few. As they did without monarchy and slavery, so they also got on without the stock exchange, the advertisement, the secret police, and the bomb. Yet I repeat that these were not simple folk, not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. They were not less complex than us. The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. This is the treason of the artist, a refusal to admit the banality of evil and the terrible boredom of pain. If you can't lick 'em, join 'em. If it hurts, repeat it. But to praise despair is to condemn delight. To embrace violence is to lose hold of everything else. We have almost lost hold. We can no longer describe happy man, nor make any celebration of joy. How can I tell you about the people of Omelas? They were not naive and happy children, though their children were in fact happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched. Oh, miracle! But I wish I could describe it better. I wish I could convince you. Omelas sounds in my words like a city in a fairy tale, long ago and far away, once upon a time. Perhaps it would be best if you imagined it as your own fancy bids, assuming it will rise to the occasion, for certainly I cannot suit you all. For instance, how about technology? I think that there would be no cars or helicopters in and above the streets. This follows from the fact that the people of Omelas are happy people. Happiness is based on a just discrimination of what is necessary, what is neither necessary nor destructive, and what is destructive. In the middle category, however, that of the unnecessary but undestructive, that of comfort, luxury, exuberance, etc., They could perfectly well have central heating, subway trains, washing machines, and all kinds of marvelous devices not yet invented here, floating light sources, fuelless power, a cure for the common cold. Or they could have none of that. It doesn't matter. As you like it. I incline to think that people from towns up and down the coast have been coming to Omelas during the last days before the festival on very fast little trains and double-deck trams, and that the train stations of Omelas is actually the handsomest building in town, though plainer than the magnificent farmers' market. But even granted trains, I fear that Omelas so far strikes some of you as goody-goody. Smiles, bells, parades, horses, blah. If so, please add an orgy. If an orgy would help, don't hesitate. Let us not, however, have temples, from which issue beautiful nude priests and priestesses, already half in ecstasy and ready to copulate with any man or woman, lover or stranger who desires union with the deep godhead of the blood, although that was my first idea. But really, it would be better not to have any temples in Omelas, at least not manned temples. Religion, yes. Clergy, no. Surely the beautiful nudes can just wander about, offering themselves like divine soufflés to the hunger of the needy and the rapture of the flesh. Let them join the processions. Let tambourines be struck above the copulations, and the glory of desire be proclaimed upon the gongs, and a not unimportant point, let the offering of these delightful rituals be beloved and looked after by all. One thing I know there is none of in Omelas is guilt. But what else should there be? I thought at first there were no drugs, but that is puritanical. For those who like it, the faint, insistent sweetness of druse may perfume the ways of the city, druse which first brings a great lightness and brilliance to the mind and limbs, and then after some hours a dreamy languor, a wonderful vision, at last, of the very arcane and inmost secrets of the universe, as well as exciting the pleasure of sex beyond all belief, and it is not habit-forming. For more modest taste, I think there ought to be beer. What else? What else belongs in the joyous city? The sense of victory, surely, the celebration of courage. But as we did without clergy, let us do without soldiers. The joy built upon successful slaughter is not the right kind of joy. It will not do. It is fearful and it is trivial. A boundless and generous contentment, a magnanimous triumph felt not against some outer enemy, but in communion with the finest and fairest in the souls of all men everywhere, and the splendor of the world's summer. That is what swells the hearts of the people of Omelas. And the victory they celebrate is that of life. I don't think many of them need to take druse. Most of the processions have reached the green fields by now. A marvelous smell of cooking goes forth from the red and blue tents of the provisioners. The faces of small children are amiably sticky. In the benign gray beard of a man, a couple of crumbs of rich pastry are entangled. The youth and girls have mounted their horses and are beginning to group around the starting line of the course. An old woman, small, fat, and laughing, is passing out flowers from a basket, and tall young men wear her flowers in their shining hair. A child of 9 or 10 sits at the edge of the crowd alone, playing a wooden flute. People pause to listen, and they smile, but they do not speak to him, for he never ceases playing and never sees them, his dark eyes wholly wrapped in the sweet magic of the tune. He finishes, and slowly lowers his hands, holding the wooden flute. As if that little private silence were the signal, all at once a trumpet sounds from the pavilion near the starting line, imperious, melancholy, piercing. The horses rear on their slender legs, and some of them neigh in answer. Sober-faced, the young riders stroke the horses' necks and soothe them, whispering, "Quiet, quiet. There's my beauty, my hope." They begin to form in ranks along the starting line. The crowds along the racecourse are like a field of grass and flowers in the wind. The festival of summer has begun. Do you believe? Do you accept the festival? The city? The joy? No? Then let me describe one more thing. In a basement, under one of the beautiful public buildings of Omelas, or perhaps in the cellar of one of its spacious private homes, there is a room. It has one locked door and no window. A little light seeps in dustily between cracks in the boards, second-hand from a cobwebbed window somewhere across the cellar. In one corner of the little room, a couple of mops, with stiff, clotted, foul-smelling heads, stand near a rusty bucket. The floor is dirt, a little damp to the touch, as cellar dirt usually is. The room is about 3 paces long and 2 wide, a mere broom closet or disused tool room. In the room, a child is sitting. It could be a boy or a girl. It looks about 6, but actually is nearly 10. It is feeble-minded. Perhaps it was born defective, or perhaps it has become imbecile through fear, malnutrition, and neglect. It picks its nose and occasionally fumbles vaguely with its toes or genitals as it sits hunched in the corner furthest from the bucket and the 2 mops. It is afraid of the mops. It finds them horrible. It shuts its eyes, but it knows the mops are still standing there. The door is locked, and nobody will come. The door is always locked, and nobody ever comes, except that sometimes, the child has no understanding of time or interval, sometimes the door rattles terribly and opens, and a person or several people are there. One of them may come in and kick the child to make it stand up. The others never come close, but peer in at it with frightened, disgusted eyes. The food bowl and the water jug are hastily filled. The door is locked. The eyes disappear. The people at the door never say anything. But the child, who has not always lived in the tool room, and can remember sunlight and its mother's voice, sometimes speaks. "It will be good," it says. "Please let me out. I will be good." They never answer. The child used to scream for help at night, and cry a good deal, but now it only makes a kind of whining. And it speaks less and less often. It is so thin, there are no calves to its legs. Its belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. Its buttocks and thighs are a mass of festered sores, as it sits in its own excrement continually. They all know it is there. All the people of Omelas. Some of them have come to see it. Others are content merely to know it is there. They all know that it has to be there. Some of them understand why, and some do not, but they all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendship, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies, depends wholly on the child's abominable misery. This is usually explained to children when they are between 8 and 12, whenever they seem capable of understanding, and most of those who come to see the child are young people, though often enough an adult comes, or comes back, to see the child. No matter how well the matter has been explained to them, these young spectators are always shocked and sickened at the sight. They feel disgust, which they had thought themselves superior to. They feel anger, outrage, impotence, despite all the explanations. They would like to do something for the child, but there's nothing they can do. If the child were brought up into the sunlight out of that vile place, if it were cleaned and fed and comforted, that would be a good thing indeed. But if it were done, on that day and hour, all the prosperity and beauty and delight of Omelas would wither and be destroyed. Those are the terms. To exchange all the goodness and grace of every life in Omelas for that single small improvement. To throw away the happiness of thousands for the chance of happiness of one. That would be to let guilt within the walls indeed. The terms are strict and absolute. There may not even be a kind word spoken to the child. Often the young people go home in tears, or in a tearless rage, when they have seen the child and faced this terrible paradox. They may brood over it for weeks or years, but as time goes on, they begin to realize that even if the child could be released, it would not get much good of its freedom. A little vague pleasure of warmth and food, no real doubt, but little more. It is too degraded and imbecile to know any real joy. It has been afraid too long, ever to be free of fear. Its habits are too uncouth for it to respond to humane treatment. Indeed, after so long, it would probably be wretched without walls about it to protect it, and darkness for its eyes, and its own excrement to sit in. Their tears at the bitter injustice dry when they begin to perceive the terrible justice of reality and to accept it. Yet it is their tears and anger, the trying of their generosity and the acceptance of their helplessness, which are perhaps the true source of the splendor of their lives. Theirs is no vapid, irresponsible happiness. They know that they, like the child, are not free. They know compassion. It is the existence of the child and their knowledge of its existence that makes possible the nobility of their architecture, the poignancy of their music, the profundity of their science. It is because of the child that they are so gentle with children. They know that if the wretched one were not there sniveling in the dark, the other one, the flute player, could make no joyful music as the young riders line up in their beauty for the race in the sunlight of the first morning of summer. Now do you believe them? Are they not more credible? But there is one more thing to tell, and this is also quite incredible. At times, one of the adolescent girls or boys who go to see the child does not go home to weep or rage, does not in fact go home at all. Sometimes also a man or a woman much older falls silent for a day or two, then leaves home. These people go out into the street and walk down the street alone. They keep walking and walk straight out of the city of Omelas, through the beautiful gates. They keep walking across the farmlands of Omelas. Each one goes alone, youth or girl, man or woman. Night falls. The traveler must pass down village streets, between the houses with yellow-lit windows, and on out into the darkness of the fields. Each alone they go west or north towards the mountains. They go on. They leave Omelas. They walk ahead into the darkness, and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible it does not exist. But they seem to know where they are going, the ones who walk away from Omelas. I don't feel worthy to provide any additional commentary on that story. I leave it to you. But I do have some people to thank now that we've reached the end of our show. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to author Stephen E. Scribner, author of the Taunt Fantasy series, who makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner for his song A Poem from the album Pianosphere that we used during the ad break. If you make music and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's or Stephen's songs, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making the show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. I recently learned that he's got this other show with Kurt Clopton. Kurt Clopton, the author of the Super Guy duology and the novel Spank. I admit that has hurt, but Doug and I are working through it. And so I still want to thank you for your work you do for this show, Doug. And I can't let that frustration and situation distract me and make me forget to mention that Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com, check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate it and review it wherever you found it. And please check out my novels and collections of poetry and tell a friend about them too. Even a very short review, single click on that 5th star makes a huge difference to authors. So if you have 3 minutes, make my day. I would be so pleased to see an additional review for one of my books. I'm too old to tell you to smash that like button, but if you could gently tap on the like button for this show too, I'd greatly appreciate it. So my advice will be a little different this week, but maybe this will be my advice going forward, and that is just to remember the idea from Professor Schneider. I'm trying to remember his first name. I'm looking back over my shoulder for the book. I believe it's Timothy Schneider, who wrote On Tyranny. And his rule number 1, his first bit of advice is do not obey in advance. So if you find yourself hesitating right now, nervous, your feeling is legitimate, but don't let it affect your actions. Do not obey in advance. On that note, have a wonderful week, and I will see you all next week.
If I take my time, I make up my